Hello and welcome to this special fireside session of ExecuNet Masterclass. I'm your host, Tony Vlahos. If you find yourself moaning about your 80-hour work weeks, well, you're not alone. Too many of us are overly invested in our careers. We've fallen for the belief that the more hours we put in and the more we sacrifice of our personal life, the higher we will rise. The dirty, not so little secret among entrepreneurs in particular is that whether they fail or succeed, they often pay a very high personal cost for the risks they take. My guest today knows there's a better way. Like most apostles of change, Sheryl O'Loughlin had an awakening on her own road to Damascus. In a few moments, you'll learn about Sheryl's career journey and life. Most important, she'll share the hard-earned wisdom she's gained from her experiences launching a company called Plum from the ground up, running two fast-growing companies, Cliff Bar and REBBL, a growing beverage company with a social and health mission, and mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs. My hope is that our time together today will inspire you and give you the guidelines to transform how you work, lead, and live. I think it will. So real quick, the format for today's session. Sheryl and I will be talking, and I promise she'll be doing most of that. You may, of course, chat in questions, and I'll do my best to include them in our conversation. Some of you emailed me some really great questions earlier this week. Thank you so much for that, and I will be asking those as well. Now, let me tell you a little more about the inspiring person virtually seated right next to me. As a child, Sheryl was best known for rushing everywhere and being too impatient to pour milk into a glass before drinking it. As an adult, she is no less eager. She served as the CEO of Cliff Bar, where she introduced the world to Luna Bars. She was the co-founder and CEO of Plum Organics, and she's currently CEO of REBBL Super Herb Beverages. One of her favorite roles was mentoring budding entrepreneurs when she was the executive director at the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. With her new book, Killing It, Sheryl is able to share her advice with a wider group of current and aspiring entrepreneurs all at once, which really delights her because, of course, that's a lot faster. And that means more time for drinking wine at her Santa Rosa home and hanging out with her husband and her two sons. I am so honored to present this remarkable and thoughtful woman to you today. Hi, Sheryl. It's good to be talking to you again.
Oh, Tony, it's such a pleasure. I love speaking with you.
Terrific. We are going to cover a lot of ground. I have not had my maca mocha today. I'm sorry, but hopefully I'll be able to get some soon, right?
Oh, I'm going to take care of you. I can't believe your store ran out of it. Actually, I do, because every time stores keep running out of this product, it's so yummy.
Awesome. So let's dive right in and talk about some earlier days, Sheryl. We hear that there's nothing like being an entrepreneur to make you feel more alive. There's nothing like it to make you feel like you're making a difference, and there's nothing like it to give you that energy to challenge your brain and to fill your heart. Did you know growing up that you were going to be an entrepreneur? Were you, the kid who charged a quarter for a glass of lemonade outside her house on a warm summer day?
Absolutely not. I was raised by a single mom, and I always was interested in issues around social justice, and how do you make sure that you're helping people in need, especially in need from the standpoint of supporting mental health. And I was all set out that I was going to be a psychologist. That's what I wanted to do. And partway through school, my mom said to me, well, I can't pay for you to be able to go to school much longer. So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, here I was raised by a single mom. So we were always worried about money. And I don't know, there's something about women. We have something called the bag lady syndrome. That is, we always think that the money's going to go away and that we're going to be, on the streets with hardly able to survive. So with that in my mind, I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? I'll go into business.
Mm.
I thought I did a deal with the devil. Business to me was all about being selfish, about only thinking of the money and killing anyone in the process to get there. And so I struggled with that cognitive dissonance for a very long time, actually, and until I discovered Cliff Bar, and we can talk about that if you want to, because it changed my life.
Sure. What are some of the harmful norms or myths, Cheryl, that you've seen in the entrepreneurial community that you would love to dispel for everyone right now? I mean, the one that leaps to mind for me, of course, is um, you just do what you love. Is that exactly true? Is that all it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I wish. Um, I do say it is my approach to do everything out of love. I mean, you spend so much time in your business as an entrepreneur and you put so much into it. If you're not doing it out of love, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. But love is not the only thing that can get you through. It's really hard work. And what we see and what I heard so much from the students I was talking to and advising at Stanford is, look, they had dollar signs in their eyes. And at Stanford, there's billionaires teaching classes, Sand Hill Road, there's money growing off the trees. And everyone thought that they were going to be the next billionaire. And what they didn't understand and what really motivated me to write this book is it is really hard. You've got many times your net worth, your whole identity wrapped up in the business, and there's nothing like it. It's like putting a piece of art on the page. It's you, and the world sees it, and that's wonderful in a lot of ways. But it's really, really hard, and entrepreneurs start to isolate themselves, and that gets you to a dangerous place. There's a light side of entrepreneurship and the light side of who we are as entrepreneurs, which is our persistence, our dedication, our willingness to break through walls to make things happen. But there's a real dark side to that: depression, alcoholism, divorce, and even suicide. And we
Mm.
have to make sure that we really hack through the branches of the dark to be able to stay in the light.
Wow, that's so beautifully said. And it's a perfect setup for what I want to talk about with you next, which is, of course, you began as the CEO of Cliff Bar, and then in 2007, you left and you founded or co-founded Plum. Tell me how Plum happened.
Well, this guy that I had worked with, named Neil Grimmer, I'd worked with him at Cliff Bar, hired him there, a brilliant product innovator and brand builder. And as I started really getting this entrepreneurial bug, which came out of seeing, what happened at Cliff Bar and this company that we were able to grow through revenue, but also grow through the ability of the company to make a difference in the world. And I was stunned by this, stunned by the passion of the people in the company who felt like they owned that company heart and soul and would move mountains for it because of the things that we were being able to do and helping heal the planet and make contribution to people's lives. And so I started talking to Neil, and both of us just got the bug. We're like, we've got to do this based on something that is so important to us, and that is our children. And what we were finding with growing kids in our house, and Neil and I are not married, but we both found it in our own families, which is we were busy parents with busy spouses. We didn't have time to pack our kids healthy lunches, or even if we did, it would come home in a bowl of mush at the end of the day because they didn't like it. It didn't taste good. And we're walking around the stores at the grocery store and seeing, in Whole Foods, there's beautiful food there, but it didn't look beautiful to kids in terms of the packaging. It tasted healthy and not really that good. And there was this great divide with food that was beautiful and attractive on the shelf in a grocery store and tasting to kids' palates really yummy because it had tons of sugar and junk in it. And so we said we got to bridge this great divide for kids. And this is when obesity in 2007 was becoming a very scary epidemic. So we said, you know what, this is a hole that we think is out there that needs to be addressed. And we developed a product called Plum. Actually, we had bought a company that was about an $800,000 company with this beautiful brand, and this woman, Gigi Chang, that created this very fresh baby food that was frozen, but it was completely good to the core. It wasn't cooked the crap out of it like it is in a baby jar. but people weren't buying it because they weren't used to making a frozen food through baby food. So we found these pouches in Europe and Asia that were widely used, but were not in this country. And they're the squeezy pouches that you see now in baby food and kids food, but they really here in this country. So we brought it over. We put baby food in it, which is very different from cooking it in a jar. You're actually it's the acid from the fruit in there that helps to cook it almost like you're cooking ceviche. And so it was fresh and wonderful. And this is really interesting. We were actually we were doing some little groups with moms and their babies. This is before we launched Plum because we wanted to see how the babies reacted to the product and if they liked it. So we'd give it to mom, and what you would think, right, that she would give it to her baby right away to see what her baby thought. What she did was she would actually put it in the spoon and put it in her mouth first, which this was this huge aha that she was being the judge of taste. And to her, this tasted unbelievably good. So we launched the product in this pouch. It didn't break like a jar. It was double the price because it was more expensive, but to consumers, this was a brilliant change in this category that was so old and dead and stayed, and it took off and grew like a rocket ship. But
Well,
it was not hard. It was a lot harder than that going through it.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was off to a terrific start from the best possible place. You had this really great niche, let's call it that. That was a very big audience, and you had a product and a story that filled a gap for this community. What were you least prepared for when the company began to scale and take off?
Everything.
Everything.
I had thought, okay, I was CEO of Cliff Bar. We're a growing company. I know how to do this. I got this handled. It was so different than what I ever expected. There were these wonderful highs, things like the product that came out of our heart coming up off of the manufacturing line, to investors saying that they'll fund the business, to seeing a baby eating our product in the world. I mean, that's why you do it. But the downsides were incredible. I mean, everything from manufacturing problems to, having to close down the office at night, the alarm's going off, you can't close the gate, you don't know who to call, from employee issues, for everything, every day as an entrepreneur, and for the entrepreneurs out there, this will feel so real. You go 20 times from the greatest high to the biggest low. And what I was not prepared for is just that. And I had even an investor that said to me, my early investor, Jed, he said, don't ride the highs and the lows too hard. And I thought, okay, I think I know what he means, to try not to ride the lows, but I can't imagine that they get too low. But what he was saying to me that I didn't even realize until the end of the whole experience was, you can't ride those highs so high and those lows so low, because the difference between those two is huge, and nothing will burn you out so fast from going up and down. What I've learned now in my company, REBBL, which is such a beautiful thing in my life, I have learned now that it will go up and down. But if it goes down, it's always going to go back up again. And I just have to ride it more like a wave. And I have to lead my people to know how to ride it like a wave. That way, we will thrive. And one of the things that I keep telling investors, and now I have these wonderful investors that get it, is the most important thing is the health of that entrepreneur. And in this, what we do, what we believe in the culture, is we've got to just whip entrepreneurs to perform at this level that is not humane. That is the worst thing for a company. We've got to change the culture around entrepreneurship.
I love the way you said that. I don't know that everyone really knows in great detail, Sheryl, what you went through while you were at Plum. You started white knuckling it, your health began to deteriorate. At the same time, your husband, Patrick, who's also an entrepreneur, started a company called Blue Sky, and things just seemed to Oh gosh, there was a confluence of things that really defined that low. Would you mind giving us a little more detail about what went on there?
Yeah, and this really preceded everything that happened with my health.
Hmm.
And, here as I was starting to my white knuckle it at Plum and, feeling all of the weight on that, my husband had this concept. It was called the Blue Sky Family Club. And it was a great concept. It was about a place where families can go and kids could exercise and do creative activities and eat healthy food while parents could relax with a beer or a glass of wine. We would tell people about this concept, parents, and they drooled over it. Patrick loved the idea. I love the idea, and I love Patrick, and I didn't want to be a naysayer, and so many people are naysayers. And so, I jumped on board and, wholeheartedly I said, let's go for it. And Blue Sky blew apart so fast your head would spin. We had put everything, all of our money into the business, and it's things, there's so many reasons why this happened. A big thing for anyone who's been in the restaurant business, you start building a restaurant and there's delays by the city and delays and upgrades that you have to do, and we were basically almost out of the money by the time the business started. And so I'll always remember Patrick came home one day and he was white as a ghost, literally, and he was cold to the touch. And I kept saying to him, Patrick, what's wrong? And he couldn't say anything. I mean, it felt like hours. It could have been minutes. I have no idea how long it was. And I asked him years later, why did it take you so long to tell me what happened? And he said, because I knew. I knew in that moment, as soon as I told you, our lives would change forever. And what we realized after I came out of the shock of what he was telling me was that we had no money left and we were in so much debt we almost went bankrupt. Literally, we just paid off our SBA loan last year. That was 8 years after we closed the door of Blue Sky. One of the first things I'll tell anyone who ever faces this is we got out of our house so fast, and so many people, their identities are so wrapped up in their house and what will everyone think if we do this. We immediately moved to a temporary house. Literally, I'd hear gunshots outside of my door, and it was, but we had to do it. We moved to Fremont in this townhouse, and we'd have drinks. We always have to have our Friday drinks, but it was out in the parking lot on lawn chairs because there was no one else to sit. But it was, we this was about survival. And so for me, to your point about the health, I started to run to blow off steam. And then I felt like, you know what, I'm going to run every day. And then I decided, well, I need to run at least as much as I did the day before, and then I would always push myself to run longer. And at that time, I had cut back on what I was eating just a little bit, and my friends and family started to say, "Oh, it looks like you're losing some weight," and I'm like, "Cool, who doesn't want to lose a few pounds?" And then people would come up to me and say, "Well, you look like you're kind of losing a lot of weight," and then they'd say, "It looks like you're losing too much weight." And I'd go onto the scale and I saw, the numbers going down on the scale, and subconsciously, I didn't even realize I was thinking this, but all of a sudden, I have a sense of control. I control these numbers on the scale. The rest of my life feels so out of control. That Plum is craziness, and Blue Sky is a mess. And here I have two little kids at home that, I'm just trying to remember to pack their lunches, let alone trying to protect them from feeling the stress, which I know that they were feeling. There was no way that they weren't. And Patrick actually, it was gut wrenching. He couldn't get out of bed. He literally couldn't sleep for 3 months. He had to go to the Stanford Sleep Clinic to try to figure out how to sleep again. And he would hold me so tight in the morning, and he would not want me to leave, and I had to break out of his arms to go to Plum. And it was too much. The whole thing was too much. And I continued down a path and developed anorexia.
My goodness, what a journey. Um, Things then began to turn around. Let's talk about that some. And I think as you began to turn things around, Sheryl, you defined for yourself and then for all of us through your book, of course, these four guidelines, right? That helped you learn the hard way who you need to be as a leader and why you are still an entrepreneur and certainly who you are as a person. Tell us what they are, then let's unpack each of them just a bit.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'll say, I do want to say before we start there is I've had this moment now with this company, REBBL, again, a super herb beverage company that is, it's all about a coconut-based elixir, and we can talk about the goodness of the super herbs like turmeric and these adaptogens like maca and ashwagandha and reishi mushroom that help to mitigate your stress. But there is something so special about this moment that I'm living with this company, and I feel like everything that we're going to talk about and learning all these lessons, got to say the hard way, actually helped me so much to get there. This is the most joyful experience I have ever had in my entire life. I've run such wonderful companies and such wonderful brands, but there's a sense of love and kindness and support that it's just mind blowing to me. And so we could talk about that more in terms of how it feels different now and how I'm handling it differently. But the points, let's talk about each of the points because I think they're the points that help me to get there.
Yes, absolutely. So connecting with your tribe and sharing what's real. I love that. Tell us more.
Well, if you think about it, there's really this uniquely warming experience when you're with a group of people that just get you. And this might seem like a silly example, but football fans where they're high-fiving each other or consoling each other when something goes wrong, or a group of parents that new parents, you can kind of like just eyeball each other and communicate that you got spit up on your shirt. It's just being around people that get it. And entrepreneurs are a tribe too. And it's particularly important for us to find each other and talk to each other. And, there's this legacy of saying that everything's great in the entrepreneurial community, and it's usually followed by the statement, would you like to invest in my company, work for me, or buy my product? And
Okay.
you need to do that, right? You need to sell a vision. That's many times in the very beginning all you have is a vision, and no one's going to join this crazy journey with you unless you're selling. But there has to be a time and a place to be real and to say to someone, I'm worried, I'm scared, I can't sleep, I feel like I'm falling apart. And I'm not saying to do that with just anyone. There's any board members you might not be able to share that with, although I'm lucky enough to have some that I can now.
Mhm.
Um, you can't always share that with your people. You can't always share that sometimes with your significant other that maybe is so very, very worried about you. But you need to be able to do it with a group of people. And the wonderful thing is, actually, the ExecuNet and what you're doing is a place where you're actually able to hear from other entrepreneurs things that are hard, but also finding a group like an entrepreneurs organization or a group like the Young Presidents Organization or my alma mater, Vistage. I'm also in a group now called OSC Squared that's all about progressive leaders who want to go beyond sustainability. And these are people that are your tribe, where you can really open up. And I have this great tribes person test. If you can be with a group of people and you can cry, you found your right group of people. And I'm not just saying women, I'm saying women and men. I've seen many men crying in Vistage because it can get that hard. Those are your people you need to be around. And if you don't want to join a group like that, create your own tribe, or look at just have a few entrepreneurs that you could talk to, but people that you could really be yourself and be vulnerable. It's essential. We all need other people. We're social animals.
I love it. The next one, protecting your self-worth. There's a quote in your book that, among the many things that I've highlighted, reads, money can easily distort good sense. When I read that and I recalled your second guideline, protecting your self-worth, there was an intuitive connection for me. Talk
Yeah.
to us about self-worth and regardless of the other stuff, right? Tell us about what it's like and what that really means.
Yeah, well, you are not your business. None of us are our business, no matter how much it feels like that. You know, your self-worth can get so tangled up in a profit and loss statement. I know mine did. When the numbers go down, you feel like a failure. When they go up, you feel like you're on top of the world. But you know, these are not who we are as people. We are going to go on way beyond our business. We are not the sum of our balance sheet. We are not the title of our business card. Our self-worth does not equal our business worth. And let's tell you a quick story. When I had moved to Santa Rosa, this was after I had left Stanford, and I just I just was had to take some time off and just really try to find myself again. And I, you know, as any good Jew would do, I went to the local Unitarian church and I found this group of women who were just had this little support group. And so I always remember I walk into this church, you know, it's got a worn rug and it smells like coffee. And I walk into this room of women, and they were in their 70s and their 80s. And we sat down and they started to introduce themselves, and they would share how, you know, someone would share they were caring for an ailing husband, or they like puttering around in their garden or volunteering in the church. And it came to my turn to talk, so I sat up straight in my chair and I start rattling off the accomplishments on my resume, and they all just kind of looked at me. And I kind of like regrouped and looked back at them, and I said, you know what? I'm just trying to find myself. And this wise woman sitting next to me said, you know, Sheryl, we've all been there, and we can maybe help or just be here to listen. And I realized these women didn't want to, didn't even care if I was the co-founder of Plum or the CEO of Cliff Bar. They wanted to know who I was, that I was a loving daughter, a mom, a wife, that I, you know, was a Chardonnay enthusiast and I loved camping, and I was an avid reader. They just wanted to see me as the person that I was. And it was just such an eye-opener to me on, you know, we aren't our businesses. And for us to be allowing ourselves to be sucked in by maybe investors that are making us feel that way, we have got to be so in touch with ourself, our deep humanity, what we really stand for. And you know what? In the traditional sense of the word, if the business fails, look at 95% of them do. And I will talk to, I'm blue in the face of, to entrepreneurs to say, we have the courage to go on this epic adventure that so many people sit by the sidelines and do. And to have that courage to do that, that is a story that you will have for the rest of your life, and you will bring into any endeavor that you go forward with in the future. That is success at the end of the day. That is true success. Your
Ah,
self-worth does not equal your company worth.
just wonderful. Let's talk about the next one. I can't see you today, Sheryl, but I've seen you and I could hear your smile and the love that you bring to REBBL when you were talking briefly about REBBL. I know you have brought that love in and invested in everything that you've launched. Tell us about what this means. Bring love into everything you do. In business terms, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so, when I started my career, I started in marketing with multinational companies. And going back to my childhood, I thought, okay, marketing is my way of at least, thinking about people and how they think, how consumers think. So, thinking a lot about psychology in the mind. When I went to these big multinational companies, I was taught that as a marketer, to be a good marketer, you had to be really distance yourself. You had to be very objective and look at the data. And God forbid you were actually the consumer. You would be too close.
Hmm.
And so I was taught almost to think of things very mechanically. And then I went to Cliff Bar in 1997 for my interview, and I walked into a different world. And so, I was at the front door and for my interview, and there's dogs running around the place and bikes hanging on the wall. And literally, I can't find any people. So I walk into the back of the company, and the whole all of the employees were participating in a stretching class. And Gary Erickson, who's the co-founder and now owner of the company, and his 4-year-old daughter Lydia jump up, and Gary takes me over to his office, and he sits his daughter on his lap, and he starts asking me questions and interviewing me. And in between, as he's asking me questions, he's whispering a little bit with his daughter. And I thought, my God, here's this man who is not just sitting before me as a company owner, he's sitting before me as a baker, an athlete, a dad, a husband. And I thought, oh my God, he's bringing his whole self to work. And so I jumped at the chance to work at Cliff Bar, and Gary started telling me a lot more about how he created Cliff Bar out of his love of cycling. And he taught me to dig deep into my heart to find inspiration. And so that's when, so, I started thinking about, well, not many women use the energy bar category. And I've started to realize, well, I use Cliff Bars, but I only use them when I'm doing a hardcore workout. And I'd really love something for me as an active woman, but was more appropriate for my lighter workout days, and something that would make me feel empowered when all of the bars at the time were about men and muscle. And so started to think about this concept of Luna Bar, a whole nutrition bar for women. And the other women in Cliff Bar were psyched about it. And we did some testing and found a lot of women were psyched about it. So we launched Luna Bar, and literally the company, we didn't have a lot of money at the time. It was self-funded, and the brand took off. I mean, it became a $70 million business in just 3 years. And it stunned me to realize what putting love into a product could do. But what I began to realize more is putting love into your work is what will make all the difference in the world. I mean, I love selling a vision. I love creating a vision. I love seeing my product in the world. And each day stretches me, even to this day, with something new, and it, impassions me. And I love the people I work with. They are so wonderful. And I'll tell you one more quick story about love and
Please.
bringing love into work. So this was when I had started working at Cliff Bar, and I was going through the fundraising, which was, I have now just FYI fundraised 8 times, and every time it's like, here we go again. And it's really hard, and it takes you away from running your business. So I was just cooked at the end of this. I did the first institutional round of fundraising for REBBL, and I was cooked. And I walked into the company, and there's Paulo Hawken, who's the co-founder and chief innovation officer of the company. And he took one look at me, and I look like hell. And he said, "Can I give you a hug?" And he comes up to me, and he hugged me so hard for 2 straight minutes. And I came out of that hug, and I was ready to conquer the world. And that's love. That's why I do it. That's why I lead this company, because I adore these people. I adore these investors. It makes me so happy every day. And, we could talk about the love that I have for the product and the cause behind it, but that's why I do it. It is out of love.
Hmm. What a lesson for all of us. This next one, Sheryl, it's an interesting pairing of words, bold and humility. Talk to us about having bold humility.
Well, yeah, many people think it's an oxymoron, but to me, there are two words that fit beautifully together. And so being bold, we've got to be bold as entrepreneurs because again, we're out there in the world selling a vision that other people might not believe in at first and getting people along for the ride. And that's important. And, there's the whole myth of Steve Jobs, how he didn't listen to anybody. He just did what he thought and he changed the world because of that. And, some of that may be very true. I've also heard things like once products got in the out in the market, he listened very closely. But what is important about that is it needs to be coupled with humility. And what humility means is to me is a lot of things. One is that we are now learning, and for the people listening who have been in the Valley, have probably heard of Eric Ries and Steve Blank, who have developed the lean startup concept, which is now taking hold throughout the world because of this brilliant concept for entrepreneurs, which is really using the market to help you learn about how to grow your business. And I love this quote by Steve Blank, who said, "A startup is not a company. A startup is an experiment waiting to find a sustainable, valuable business model." And that is critical for entrepreneurs to understand. And that means listening to the market. It doesn't mean changing with what any other one person says and advises you on or that you see a consumer say, but it's finding the thread of truth as to what you're seeing out there and listening to that thread of truth and adapting and pivoting based on what you learn. That's how you build a successful business or a traditionally successful business. But I also think it's more than that. It's for us as entrepreneurs to understand we are not superheroes. Superheroes do not exist. We're human beings, and we have things that we're really good at, and we have things that we're not so good at. What makes us good is not trying to pretend we're superheroes. It's surrounding ourselves with people that could help us with our blind spots and weak points. Because I'll tell you, going out there for you, those of you who raise money, the first thing that investor is looking for is the entrepreneur and the team that you've surrounded yourself with. Many investors look at that as more important than even your product or your current business model because they know that they can adjust that. They know they can help to make that better. They want to know that you have surrounded yourself with the right people. So you need to be bold and humble at the same time. And it is putting those two words, and it's the tension in the middle of the two words that you can find the beauty of your leadership.
Mm. I want to turn in a few moments to some questions from our listeners today, as well as a couple that were chatted in to me earlier this week, Sheryl. But before we move on to that, let's talk a bit more about REBBL. I mean, again, listening to you talk about REBBL, you're that kid again who's too impatient to pour milk into the glass. So it's all come together. I mean, these guidelines certainly inform who you are and how you're leading this company. But tell us a little bit more about some of that infectious stuff going on there that clearly has turned you on and so many customers. Tell me more, please.
Yeah, so, when I had shared with you how I'd moved to Santa Rosa and I was just going to serve on boards and I was going to teach entrepreneurship, which I did for a little while at Sonoma State, which was awesome. I love dealing with entrepreneurs, but I fell in love again. So this brand came back into my life. I had known Paulo and he had reached out to me to be on his board. And so I decided I love Paulo, so I decided to accept it. And what I began to realize is this brand has the stuff of magic. And and I took on the role of day-to-day CEO again, and here's why. So there were three important things: is product, purpose, and the team. And so in terms of product, REBBL REBBL is this coconut milk-based elixir, and it has these wonderful herbs that I'll tell you about in brief. But what is so important about REBBL is it tastes exquisite. Paulo is an artist. He is a craftsman. He knows how to create product by putting in only the purest of ingredients together into this drink that is beautifully tasting. And it's so interesting to me to this day that there's so many healthy products out there, but that people don't understand the art of food. It can't just be about the health. It has to also be about the art of the food, because that's what brings people in. And what we want to do is bring a lot of people in because the product tastes so good, but when they try it, they realize the brilliance of what the plant queendom has to offer to us in terms of the pureness of what has been around for the millennia, that now people are starting to realize, in the importance of plant-rich diets. And also we have these super herbs that have also been around for the millennia that people haven't seen in this country in many cases. And people are just starting to notice turmeric, and our turmeric SKU, it's called turmeric golden milk, and we have a new one called turmeric lemon tart that is so crazy good. And it's so people have seen it. It's our top SKU is turmeric golden milk. And SKU means top flavor, because it's turmeric is just taking off, and people understanding its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. But there's also these adaptogens that people are going to hear more and more about: maca, ashwagandha, and reishi mushroom. And what there now is in these herbs like ashwagandha, there's clinical research in this country that shows that literally it helps your individual body, thus adaptogens, adapt to stress. So if you're overstressed, it will calm you down. If you're understressed, it will give you energy. So this product gives people strength. And actually, REBBL stands for roots, extracts, berries, barks, and leaves, these wonderful plants and herbs that are in the product. But it's also about the rebel in each of us and our ability to each of us to make a difference, the strength that we have. So it's a wonderful product and brand.
Love
But
it.
the cause behind it is amazing and very, very near and dear to my heart. So REBBL is actually born out of a nonprofit. The nonprofit's called Not for Sale, and Not for Sale their whole goal is to eradicate modern day human trafficking. Just to give you a few stats, there are 30 million people in this world that are impacted by trafficking, the sex trade and the slave trade. That is the fastest growing illegal industry in the world. It is number 2 behind the drug trade as the biggest illegal industry, ahead of the illegal weapons trade. 80% of it affects women and girls. There are 250,000 people that are impacted by it in this country. And I just realized American Crime, this amazing series show, is all about trafficking. It's fascinating. So people are starting to realize the extent of this problem. So REBBL was grown up with, how do we address this issue? And what Dave Bastone, the executive director and founder of Not for Sale, realized is that if by working through a for-profit business that can buy the herbs of the local community and helping them to be able to live a livelihood, they will never be vulnerable to trafficking to begin with. And so to this day, Dave Bastone sits on our board because that helps us to make sure we're being true to our true north of fighting trafficking. We give 2.5% of our net sales, not profit. It's not dependent on if we make money. The net sales of every bottle back to Not for Sale to do their work on rehabilitating people who have been trafficked. But we work with growers throughout the whole world now to make sure that they have a livelihood, that they have access to clean water, to health care, to even educating girls, which changes the world to educate girls, and it is, believe it or not, the number 6 factor in helping to reverse climate change. There's new data coming out on that. That protects people against trafficking. That is what we do, address it down the stream and up the stream.
Wow.
And then, just importantly, and I talked a little bit about this, but is the team of people behind it. And the REBBL team is so passionate. They're so creative and smart and intelligent. And I lean in a company to bringing in people with a lot of experience, because I think that helps to grow a company and creates more strength from the foundation. But to have the passion and the grit and the deep belief in the cause behind it, our team will move mountains for this company. And there's such a synergy between it. Gives me goosebumps when I think about this team. But also importantly, our investors and our board members are an integral part of this team. And I have done it the hard way. I had an investor that beat me up every day, or some days I was the best CEO, and some days I was the worst. He was a bully. And so I learned the hard way. And now my investors, believe it or not, we tell each other how much we love each other. It is a wonderful relationship where I am completely vulnerable with my investor, Dwayne. I will tell him everything, and he will tell me everything. And that's what makes our company better, because we can help each other through the hard times. So team, purpose, and product and brand, I have found the magic in this company, and I'm doing it in a healthy way.
That's extraordinary. Gosh, and I want to turn to the questions from our listeners. And the first one, in fact, relates to what you just said about Dwayne. And it goes, Sheryl, first, your story has really touched me. What is your advice to new entrepreneurs in terms of securing an investment partner? I think you've already shared some of those traits, but if you could deepen our understanding just a bit about who we should turn to for investments.
Yeah, it's an important question, because the first dollar that you take from an investor changes the course of your company, or can change the course of your company if you don't make the right choice. And so it's very easy as an entrepreneur when you need money, and to grow your company, and it can get very scary at times. But it is really important to know that that person you take impacts you, not only the future of your company, but you and how every day goes in that company. I was with my investor every day. I didn't know, in my investor that I had at Plum, I didn't know who I was going to get, and my world would rock up and down with each phone call. You have to vet these people. Do not take the money just from they give you a couple references that say, oh, they're really good people. Talk to people. Find the people that they're not telling you that they have invested in, and call those people and say, I need to know the real story here. Is this someone that I should take money from? And I know we made the mistakes. I talked to people that had been invested with this person, and a couple people I talked to had said, oh, they're great. It was the references that he gave me. I come to find out after, almost every entrepreneur he invested in has said the same exact thing about their experience with him. And I didn't do my homework. I was just like, wow, this guy's going to give me money. He seems really good. He talks a great story. So I took it.
Hmm. Related question, Sheryl. This one comes from the CEO of a 4-month-old startup who wants to know some tactical tips on how to do business development better. This is a mysterious thing, business development, to a lot of us. So tell us what it takes to do it well.
Well, one of them is having the gumption to just go out and do it, and
Mhm.
not be afraid. And I think what happens a lot, we have so many voices in our head that are telling us that sometimes that we're not good enough. And some of us hide it very well, but all of us have these voices. And so it's really being bold and willing to ask anybody for a contact, anybody for help. Find somebody's name and call them. You would be shocked as to how many people react, especially as a new entrepreneur. Really own your story. Know why you did it. Why did it come from your heart? Why do you believe so strongly in this? And, it was very interesting. I had students that I would advise at Stanford, and some students would come into my office and they would be so bold, and they'd sit up and they'd know their story very succinctly and clearly, and could tell it with such passion. And then I had others that wouldn't look me in the eye. They would go on for about 10 minutes trying to describe their idea. And they started losing me within 2 minutes. that you can go talk to, you could try to talk to anyone. If you can't tell that story succinctly and clearly and with passion, you're going to lose them.
Hmm.
So make sure you have it. Think about your elevator pitch. I mean, literally, you're in an elevator for, what, 10 seconds, whatever, 30 seconds. Be able to tell your story in those chunks. Know your story in a 30-second chunk. Know your story in a minute chunk. Be able to say why you're passionate about it and why it's going to be huge. Then
Love
you
it.
can talk to people. And I would also say on that, when you're calling someone, people love to know that you know something about them and there's a reason why you're calling them. Hey, I got your name from so and so. They said you're brilliant at this. I would love to take just 15 minutes of your time and time yourself. Don't overstay. You're welcome. Explain what you're doing very quickly and then ask a ton of questions.
Wonderful advice. There's, of course, a lot of risk wrapped up in entrepreneurship. I would say that corporate entrepreneurs like myself, CEOs of companies, all experience the risk, right? Financial risk, emotional risk, brand risk. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of doubt. This
Yes.
question comes from someone who is a CEO, and they would like to know any advice you can offer on overcoming self-doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I had that. Look at, I talked about how my self-worth was so wrapped up in my company, and there was this voice in my head all the time telling me, "Oh, you're not saying that well. You're not good at that, and how could you go out there and say it?" And I have to say, it's also especially true for women because we tend to. I saw this a lot at Stanford, and I know in myself that we think we have to have way more experience. There's studies on this actually, way more experience than we do. And a lot of men feel like, you know what, I can just go out there and do it. I'm just going to do it. And what all of us as people need to understand is that we don't need to have every answer. We don't have anyone around you who makes it seem like they have every answer. It, they're having as many doubts as you are. It's having the confidence to just say, okay, take that voice out of my head, get into my pace of strength, dig deep, and go out there with strength and confidence, but a humility to be able to ask questions. So instead of just saying, okay, here's what it is, here's the answer, is to say, you know what, this is what I believe and here's why. So tell me, what do you see? What's your perspective? Is there another way of seeing it that I'm not seeing it? Because that's a way to kind of calm yourself down and remind yourself that you don't have to have all the answers.
Hmm. A senior director of an IT company from the West Coast wants to know, I'm sorry, senior director of IT from a West Coast software company who chatted into me this week, wanted to know how Sheryl handles criticism now that she's taken this journey from being CEO,
Mm-hmm.
founder, and now back leading REBBL. I'm sure you're in position to hear things that, aren't very nice or at times are constructive, but may not come out that way. How do you deal with all that?
It's such a good question, and I could say I'm not perfect in any stretch of the imagination. Sometimes when I hear, I had a consumer that had written in who was upset because I had talked a little bit about my feelings on the election, so maybe that wasn't appropriate for me to do in a form of my business. But it really, it hurt. It really hurt because I was felt bad because I didn't think empathetically about somebody, how someone else's perspective was. But I've got a different. My husband taught me a big lesson. My husband taught me a lot of lessons. He's my soulmate. And one of the things we went to, I'll tell you a quick story. I was hanging out with a group of friends. They were good, really good friends who I met when I was raising my first child, and I, was hardcore in business and going through it and doing the mom thing in the best way I could. And one of my friends was driving me to this party of all the rest of our friends, and she said, "Sheryl, you know what? I got to tell you, we just don't agree with the way you're raising your kids. We think that you're just too hard charging, and it doesn't make sense to us." And I was horrified, and every mom is like, every mom believes they're the worst mom and they're not doing anything right. And it was in my gut, like I was just going to throw up in that moment. And I had to sit in this party for hours. And I got home and Patrick wasn't even there. He was out of town, and I called him and I was bawling, and I was like, I'm such a bad mom. I'm just terrible at everything. And he said to me, Sheryl, we raise our family in the way that we think is right. We feel very strongly about the way that we're raising our family, and we give them so much love. And the moments we're with them are moments that are so precious. And he said, it doesn't matter what other people say to you. We need to be solid in what we believe. And all of a sudden, like over time, it didn't take it immediately, but over time, that kind of flowed through me. And this friend, believe it or not, came back to me years later and said, you and Patrick did the whole thing right. And I was absolutely wrong in what I said. And that taught me that, you know what? I'm not always right. And I am a learner for the rest of my life, and I will always listen. But I need to be solid in what I believe, and who I believe I am is the best parent I can be, is the best worker I can be, is the best friend that I can be. This is my ecosystem. It's the way I manage it and how I feel about it. And I think that we need to really embrace that as people and know that our lives are our lives and no one else's lives.
Very insightful. Sheryl, I want you to stay a few more minutes, okay? I want to get to at least
Yeah.
two more questions. Everyone, please stay. These are really good. Okay. This one comes from someone who would like to know. I'm gonna riff on this just a little bit, but the core question is there any ever a wrong time or a right time to start a business? And the question really is, any advice on becoming an entrepreneur when you're 50 plus? Is that necessarily a wrong time or a right time? What's your answer to that question?
Oh, I have goosebumps if this person actually asking is 50 plus, because I love that. I was always, when at Stanford, I was always walking around to people because having created a business out of my passion as a mom. I'm like, there's so many businesses could be created by people 55 plus based on their perspective and their passion that will change the world of the life of people who are, right now in the boomer age and, in my group now coming through, because your perspective on that is so much better than anyone else who's trying to create products for this market that doesn't get it. And I'm so passionate about that idea of somebody really doing it and killing it from that perspective. I just think that's so, so great. But it's also a question, and I also think it's a right time because now, I'm getting up there. I'm always the oldest one in the room. And this perspective I've had now on life has helped me. I think that's also been a help of me in terms of how I run my business, because I'm living in just purely in the moment of it and not worrying about, oh my God, what happens in the future if something goes wrong and all that. I've been through that. I could just be at peace. And I want to share, for those of you who know Joseph Campbell, who is no longer with us, but he created The Power of Myth, A Hero's Journey. He put together every possible philosophy, psychology, medicine, and really created this philosophy through thinking about myth that is so wonderful. And if you haven't read any of his work, I highly encourage you. As business people, it really will ground you. And one of the things that he said was, he said, when you're young, as I never worried about getting old, and that's why I'm bringing this up. I never worried about that. And I never understood fully why. And he said, when you're young, it's all about this feeling of, I got to get to the next place. And it's all about the future and always the future, always the future. And when you get older, it's about the present, because you've been there, you've done that. It's about living in the present. And I think it's a wonderful time to be a CEO, because you can live it very differently and mentor other entrepreneurs who are going along the way, who really need your wise, sage, experienced perspective. So I don't know if that person was 55 plus, but that just struck me when you said that.
Oh, I bet they are. Oh, that's awesome. We're going to end on that note. That is phenomenal. So, Sheryl, thank you so, so much for
Oh, thank
sharing
you.
your insight, for making time and being with us today. Thank you all for hanging out, for asking your questions, for shooting me questions in advance. I love you guys for that. And you know, you're my most precious asset and resource, and I treasure it. So, Sheryl, any final thoughts before we officially wrap up our fireside chat today?
Yeah, if I have to say anything, it's one thing that I wasn't able to say is as an entrepreneur, it's very easily to isolate ourselves, and we're so busy that we're just the thing that we do is we start shoving out anything or taking care of ourselves, exercising, our relationships, our families, our friends. My friends now are so deeply important to me because they're the ones that told me that I had something wrong. They could be our canaries in the coal mine. So please reach out, even if it's taking time from your company. That is important time that's breathing life into you so you can go back to your company and even give more. It's not spending so much time, it's being in the company, it's spending the right time in the company.
Hmm. Guys, please check out REBBL. The drinks are delish. Please check out her book, Killing It, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Head Without Losing Your Heart. It's not just for entrepreneurs. It is for everyone. So with that, thank you, Sheryl. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing everyone at the next masterclass. Bye for now.